Hi guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel here. Many people are starting to build Copilot Studio agents, but only a few people know the infrastructure which is behind it and what is necessary to build Copilot Studio agents. Most of you guys probably are starting off just logging into copilotstudio.microsoft.com. They see there's environment, most likely it's gonna be the default environment, and then they're gonna start building agents. However, what most people don't know is this will bring you a lot of issues along the line, especially if you want to start building an application for a customer or for your company. There are a few principles which you need to pay attention to so you don't get any issues at a later stage while developing your agents. So today in this video, we're gonna address how you basically can apply those principles and how you can create that and what is the bigger picture behind Copilot Studio and how you can basically reliably build your Copilot Studio agents and can hand them over to a customer or use them within your company at a later stage. It's important to understand the two following components. So there is an environment. An environment is basically a container which can hold one or more solutions. And a solution is a package that contains the configuration, the data, and an agent. And part of that solution is then the agent. But an agent has more what we call subcomponents in the Power Platform context. It can be, for example, a knowledge source, which is a Word or a PDF file. It can have a Power Automate flow or a few other components which are associated with a Copilot Studio agents. And all these components are within one solution, and the solution is then within one environment. Important is, within environments, we normally have different environments. For example, we have a development environment where the developers are working. We have a testing environment where your business key users can test the agent. And we have a production environment where the solution is then actually hosted and being used from your end users. Why do you have those three environments? Well, if you want to make changes to an agent in your development environment, you don't want that your end users, which are using the app or the agent in production, are basically can't use the agent anymore because you are making changes. And that way, you are basically forecoming that when you are doing changes in your development agent, it will interfere with the production agent. And the solution has also two types. We have an unmanaged solution, which means it can be made changes to it, so you can change the agent. And there is a managed solution. The managed solution is normally then used in the test and the production environment, so no changes can be made there, and changes can be only made in the development environment for the same reason, to just ensure that the production agent is always working and not running into any problems and stops working for the end users. Now, how does this process and these components look in the bigger picture? So normally what we start off with is an unmanaged solution. And the unmanaged solution, you're adding your agent, your knowledge sources, which can be documents, for example, and they are all within one solution. I'm showing you later how you can create a solution and how you can add these components in there. This solution, this unmanaged solution, is living in a development environment. And this development environment is used only to develop and make changes to the agent. So it's not meant for sharing it with your colleagues so they can test it, and it's also not meant for them to use it in a production environment. Instead, we do a so-called deployment. And a deployment means you are exporting the solution from one environment, from the development environment, to a test environment. So you are done, for example, with your agent development. Now you want someone else to test it. So therefore you are exporting it as a so-called managed solution. And you're gonna deploy it into the test environment. Once it's tested there and it's being thought, okay, everything is good now, we don't need to change anything anymore, you are taking that solution, export it as a managed solution, and bring it into the production environment. And that has the big benefit. If you're changing something on the top in your development environment, your production environment solution or your agent will not suddenly stop working. So even if you completely break your solution within the development environment, your production agent will still run as it is. And that's the reason why we have this distinguishing of solutions and environments for Copilot Studio development. So before we are creating any solution or an agent, we need an environment which we can create, so we can actually create our solution and our agent inside that. Therefore, we are heading to admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com, and we are clicking on the left here on Manage, and we are clicking on Environments. And within Environments, you have the possibility on top here to create a new environment. And the most important thing for you to know is there are 3 different types of environments which are important for us. You have the trial environments, but let's leave them out for now. You have a sandbox, you have a production, and a developer environment. So the developer environment, as it speaks for itself, is for the development. The sandbox is normally used for the test environment, and the production environment type is used for the production environment. So as a first step, you are creating a developer environment, and you're gonna host it in one of the regions, ideally in the one where you're residing, or if you want the latest updates from Microsoft, then you can also think about hosting it in the US as well. So you just give it a name. For example, you can give it a name like dev and then Copilot Studio. And then you can also check the default settings. You could make it as a managed environment. We're not going into depth here, but it's important for Copilot Studio development to have a Dataverse storage associated with your environment. So once you have selected that, you can come up here and you add the language, the currency, and you can just hit save, and it will start provisioning your environment. So within a few seconds, you're going to see it popping up here. We can see now Dev Copilot Studio, and you need to wait until the state shifted from preparing to ready state, and that Dataverse is being ticked here as yes. Once that's the case, then you can start using this environment and can start developing in it. Once our provisioning is done, we can see that the state shifted to ready and the Dataverse store shifted to yes. So the next thing what we can do is we can navigate to this environment within Copilot Studio. So therefore we are opening copilotstudio.microsoft.com, and once you are within copilotstudio.microsoft.com, you can see at the top here your environment. In my case, it's the Dev Copilot Studio environment, and within here we can now start creating a solution. Therefore navigate on the left here to those 3 dots and click on Solutions. And remember, the solution is basically the component which contains our agent and our knowledge sources. So you always have 2 default solutions in here. You can just ignore them, and you can see already here you have an unmanaged and a managed solution. So therefore we are creating a new solution here on top, and we can give it a name for whatever it is. For example, test solution Adrian. And ideally in your case, you're giving it a proper name, and you can select a publisher here as well. And a publisher is basically responsible to always give it a prefix for the specific components which you have. Ideally, you're creating a new publisher for yourself and give it a prefix so you can find all of your specific components later back within the Power Platform. So let's click on new publisher. We can give it a name like Adrian's Publisher. And I'm just copying that for the name as well. And you can see here you have a prefix. So if you get a prefix, every object which you create, for example, the agent, gets a logical name with that specific prefix. So you can easily find all of your components back that way. Just hitting save, and we also need to make sure that the name has no spaces, and the publisher will be automatically associated, and we can just hit create. And now that that's done, it's opening the solution automatically within our environment. So we can see our environment here, and we can see our solution here. And now you have your environment ready and you have your solution ready with which you can work now. So now that I have my solution, well, the question is, where do I create my agent now actually? There are a few options. It depends slightly from where you are creating your agent. But let's say you're already in the solution, then you can just click on new and you can click on agent and you can create an agent, and it will create it directly inside your Copilot Studio solution. Or the other option is, let's say you are starting here from the canvas while chatting with it, you can just click on the settings here and you have the possibility to select your solution, test solution Adrian, and you can see automatically that schema name shifts to the AG, which we just created before in that specific solution. And the third way is you can create a blank agent. You have the agent settings here, and you can create the solution in here, and it will give it a name. For example, let's give it Adrian's agent. We can hit create, and it will now start creating that agent in that specific solution, which we will just see in a moment. Now that my agent is provisioned, it has been created in the solution itself, we can just go back to the solutions, and what we can see here now is, sometimes just after a refresh of the website here, we can see now that the agent has been added to my solution. And the interesting thing is, you would assume that there's only an agent component, but behind that agent there is also a bunch of other topics and other subcomponents which are created with that agent. And that is why it's so important to have a solution, because this solution is bundling all of the components in once. And if you want to bring it to another environment, to your test environment, then you can just take that whole solution and don't need to figure out where all of the components are, because they are centrally stored within that solution which you created at the beginning for yourself. Now we have set up all of the foundations which you need for Copilot Studio development. You have your environment, you have your solution, and your agent is added to your specific solution. In this video, we're not going to cover how you will deploy between different environments, etc. This is purely on which foundations you need to start developing on your agent. So now for you, it's to just develop your agent in your specific development environment, in your solution. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how you can basically deploy that solution across multiple environments and what is important to watch out therefore. So thanks again for watching here, and I'm going to see you in the next one. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thank you guys. Bye bye.